We'll be moving on to our third speaker. And also, I do want to mention that we have a full program, of course, today and tomorrow, where we will go into depth on some of the issues that have been brought up already, such as product management, such as building your T-shaped profile. So make sure to check out the program and tune in for those sessions if that piqued your interest. Now it's time to welcome Renee Malone from Itility, and we're now going to talk a little bit more about the recruitment side. So a lot of you have already been asking questions about recruitment, and Renee is the person as a recruitment specialist to tell us more about what to expect from the application process and how you can take control over your recruitment process. So Renee, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. If you could please open your camera and then the floor is yours.
Hi, Laura. I can't open my my camera because you stopped the video, so perhaps you could start it again. There we go. Fantastic. Hi, thanks all. First of all, thank you, Laura. Thank you for introducing me. I'll give you a brief introduction of myself, and then I would launch into a short presentation that I've made. Indeed, my name is Renee. I am a recruitment specialist. I have been in recruitment for the last 10 years. I've experienced both on the agency side and on the corporate side. And then for the last, well, nearly a year, I've been with Itility. Itility focuses on bringing innovative tech solutions from a consultancy perspective to large international enterprises and more mid-sized companies. We work on cloud solutions and data solutions as this particular specialty. This has led me to hire and interview a lot of data professionals over the last year. And but with my general experience, I would love to give you some tips on how to control your own interview process, because what I gathered indeed from the last session is that a lot of you experienced recruiters to be quite pointed towards technical skills and almost sometimes feels like a little to-do list. And you tick some boxes, but you have your own input, and it's really a two-way street. And I want to show you how to use that. So I'd like to share my screen. So I'll start with my PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. So how do you indeed take care to take control of your recruitment process? So I think it is important to understand that any vacancy is in essence a business problem. No company opens a vacancy out of the goodness of their heart just because they enjoy recruiting, even though me as a recruiter, I would love to do that. But either the company is smart and foresees a need in the future, or they have someone, an urgent need. That can be someone who left. It can be a new technology that they don't master yet. That can be a project that is tacked on and they need extra help. So a hire is always a solution to that problem. This means that you as the candidate are either the solution, you are not the solution, or you are actually more than the solution. So you bring more than what they ask for. It is important to you, but also to the company, to accurately find out whether you are the solution to their business problem. Now, let's start at the basis. So what you really need to know. The recruitment process, there's actually two forms of it. There's a more traditional form and a digital form. I'll explain later where those differences come from. But in the traditional form, you are actively looking for a new job. You find the vacancy, you've done your research, you apply, potentially you've written a lovely cover letter explaining why this particular vacancy attracts you. You have added your resume, and then the recruiter reviews it and reaches out to you if they too see a fit. That is the official start of the selection process, which usually is composed of multiple stages. There's an offer, and you are hired. This is, of course, the best case scenario. There's always the possibility that there's no fit, and that you get to know that during the process. But let's just always stick to the best case outcome. In the digital version, the company releases a vacancy, you see it, you apply for it, or a recruiter actively contacts you for it, the selection process starts, and you start to do your research. Then you get the offer, and then you get to hire. So it is a very small difference, but it is a significant difference. And the main difference is that you are in the digital version more of a consumer than the person who applies. And this I like to call the one-click digital transition, digital economy. If you're hungry, well, you click on Deliveroo or Uber and you have a full meal in front of your doorstep. 20 minutes to an hour later, you want to go somewhere? Well, there's Go Scooters, or you can order an Uber. You're in need of some retail therapy, no need to leave your house. You can just click on Zalando or any other shop. Do you need a job or want a job? There's LinkedIn offering you all these options. And then there's even more like recurring subscriptions that make it super easy. So all of these have in common that it's one easy click and it's done. You fill out a form, there's minimal information that you need to pass on. There's minimal thinking actually going on, apart from what is it I want right now. So it's very instantaneous. This means that it's very easy. It's very quick, can be quite casual. There's lots of choice. And the outcome is overall rather positive, discovering new restaurants, new places to go, making it extra easy for you as a candidate or as a person. But they're not always positive. So what recruiters have experienced is that candidates are often less prepared because, you know, clicking on that ad can be a spur of the moment thing, can be very spontaneous. It just looks good, or you happen to have a really bad day in your current role, or you're really, you know, you're just getting started on the market and you don't really know. So you just click on everything. And this means that hiring structures can be overwhelmed. The problem is that bad hiring decisions can be made. I know I see in the slide that I said bad hiring decisions made, but it can be made. And this is generally the case. It's always a two-way street. A really good recruiter can filter out the people that are not an optimal match or do not have the right motivation. But I feel the candidate also can take control of the process to make sure that they are not hired in a role that is unsuitable for them in the long term. I'll go back one. The result is actually, what is a bad hiring decision? It often means that people leave their jobs relatively quickly. So what the recruitment industry has noticed is that there is an actual uptick in people leaving within either the first 4 months or the first year. It depends a little bit on your local economy. In the Netherlands, year contracts are very prevalent. So you can see a trend where people after 1 year decide not to renew their contract or don't have their contracts renewed. This is pre-COVID corona crisis, of course. This changes things a lot, so I'm not taking that into account. But before that, the trend was that people were not extending their contracts. And that is usually due to lack of fit. People do not live up to expectations, or also equally bad, the job does not live up to the expectations of the new employee. So how can you take charge of your own recruitment process? So what I believe is that no matter how wonderful it is that there's spontaneous clicking on job ads that look great or look like a great fit, or conversations that happen with recruiters that reach out to you, please keep doing that, because you never know what gem you're going to stumble on, or what career opportunity you're going to get. It is important to really know what your values are. Who are you? What matters to you? And you can only do that by really a little bit of introspection and really taking the time to do that. It may sound a little, I don't know, airy-fairy, but I still think that it is important to take time to do that, because once you know yourself, you can ask the right questions. Also, even if you've already clicked, but before you are contacted or the moment you get contacted by a recruiter, please do yourself the favor to research the company, not just the vacancy. So don't just read the vacancy, but really research the company. There's Glassdoor, there's a website, there's LinkedIn, there's promotional information being put out, videos, articles, and your network, of course, people who already work there, people who've worked there, or people who might have heard of it. So I think it is important that you do that research no matter where you are, not later on, but actually quite early on. And the last thing that I would say is write down what you need to know before making a decision. So what are non-negotiables for you? I think it's very important that you figure this out in advance, because then you don't forget to ask for them, and eventually it will help you make better decisions. Companies do the same. I mean, I, as a recruiter, one of the first things I ask a hiring manager is, okay, in your very long list of requirements, what is the top 3? What is truly non-negotiable and what are nice to haves? So that's very important. So then during the interview, it is quite important that you are clear on your expectations. You have something to bring to the table, and you should let people know this. What is important to you, and if it's not important to them, that's actually okay. It's just important to know that you are then not a match. And if it is completely aligned, that is fantastic. So you also want to get clarity on the company's expectations. So what are the goals for the department? What are the goals for this particular role within the department? What are KPIs or other metrics? What's the definition of success? So obviously companies have missions and vision statements. Review those, and also review how the department contributes to reaching those missions and visions. How does the role contribute to realizing the vision of the broader company? And how does that translate to KPIs and other metrics? Be clear on your strengths. I think you can expect the general question, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and you can give answers. And it's important that companies know what you're good at. What can they use your knowledge for? Who should they couple you with when you in areas that you're not as strong at? I think it is, everybody has weaknesses, but as long as you know what they are and how you can, let's say, utilize your strengths to compensate for the things you're not as good at, then you can easily get the team to a higher level. To give you a clear example, I love thinking long term. I love having a North Star to work towards, and I always have plenty of ideas. Now, I love to start things, and sometimes I get a little bit bogged down in the practicalities of day-to-day operations, and execution then starts to lag behind. But paired up with someone who has excellent project management skills, and together we actually realize more than perhaps what is initially expected of us. So together we are the perfect pair. And during the interviews as well, make sure that you ask frequent follow-up questions. I have noticed that a lot of people, a lot of candidates leave their questions to the end. which is fine. Personally, I have a preference for questions throughout the interview, because then you hear something in the interviewer's story or the way the interviewer asks questions that triggers a question of your own. And then if you ask that question, it really becomes a two-way street. It really becomes a conversation where you're talking as equals. If you do prefer to ask questions towards the end, or if your interviewer has made very clear that questions should wait until the end, write them down. Write down what you really want and say, oh, by the way, we were talking about data mesh. Can you tell me if you've already actively used that in a project? Or, well, can you tell me a little bit more about your project management methodologies? What is the standards that you're using? Do we need certification, or can I get certified if I'm not? So those are very valid questions to ask. And ask them and write them down. And I think they're actually probably more insightful than questions you have pre-prepared. This doesn't go against, by the way, saying what I said earlier, that there are minimum need to knows. So these two are combined. There's minimum things you need to know to make your decision about the company and whether the role truly is for you. But then also make sure that you ask questions about things said in the interview. Ask for clarification. Ask for things that are not clear. If people say, well, here we work really hard, it's always a good thing to check, well, what do you mean? What does hard work mean for you or your company? Is it long hours, or is it working with perhaps the US, which means that you need to make calls in the evening rather than just between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock on a regular workday. So then you get a lot more insights. I see here a question. How do we know the team environment for which we're getting hired? Sometimes it may be different from the company's value or environment, and you do not know until you join the team. That is very true. Well, most departments have their own mission and vision statements. Ask about that. What is their goals? What are their own KPIs? You then get a good impression. So I think for me, the easiest way to answer this is a previous company I've worked for. I worked for Philips for nearly 5 years. Obviously, we had as a global mission and vision to improve the lives of 3 billion people by the year 2030. Now, the recruitment organization doesn't create healthcare products or active products, but we bring in the best talent. And our KPIs were centered around candidate satisfaction, hiring manager satisfaction, and time to fill. So then you have a bit of an idea what environment you land in. And other than that, Ramesh, what you could do is see a little bit what kind of people are already in the team. You can always use LinkedIn, a little bit like a recruiter uses LinkedIn, to look up people, look up the manager, look up the person you're talking to, and see what they say on their own profile, and you'll get an idea of what matters to them. Hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Renee. Also, there's a question that actually came in from our YouTube live stream.
Okay.
So I'd love to bring that in as well. And thank you also for those of you watching through YouTube, of course. This question is about being fired or gaps perhaps on your resume. How do you as a recruiter look at that? And especially now with the pandemic, since a lot of people are losing their job, how do you think that affects their future recruitment process?
So I think it's very important. So thank you for asking this question, because it is a really important question, particularly with the pandemic. Now, the good news is that LinkedIn has brought in stay-at-home parent or any other gap that you can fill out on your resume. There's quite a lot of people who already fill out that they're using a sabbatical. Personally, as a recruiter, I don't necessarily look at it. I think then it is important to explain, what causes the gap on your resume, and be quite open and honest about it for as much as you can be. And be to also keep learning throughout your unemployment history. So make it clear to the recruiter what steps you have taken to become employed again or stay relevant, particularly in the tech environment. Like I said, we went from data warehouses to data lakes to now potentially looking at data mesh. You have different technologies. It is important to stay up to date, and there, as a candidate, does come in your personal responsibility. So I think there it's important to keep learning. The previous speaker actually spoke about how important it is to keep learning, and one of the questions was if the company that you're working for has a responsibility to help you keep learning. I agree that it's in a company's responsibility to facilitate learning, but it is the employees or the candidates' responsibility to learn and to be eager and to stay on top of their industry knowledge.
Thanks, Renee. And also, we are coming towards the end of your time. So if you could just walk us through the rest and wrap up. Thank you so much.
I'll be wrapping up really soon. So another few best practices are and that you know it's a really good company and that you can ask for yourself. So I think it's always important that you are aware that you can ask for things such as a work sample or a test case. This can be a business case. This can be a coding. This can be co-coding. You can request an interview with a tech specialist, especially if you're only speaking to the department manager. Feel free to ask for that. Make sure that there's a clear timeline and request who does what for each interview step. This allows you to get a 360 view. So it's very important that you understand why certain people are in the interview process, what their contribution is, what their decision-making power is, and also know what their role is so that you can ask the right questions. So the result of a good process is that you know what the role really is, what is the preferred way of working, what are priorities for the department, what are goals, the contribution of the role in the company structure, and what the company expects. And on the other hand, the organization knows your strengths, your weaknesses, your values, your approach, your current skills and what level they are, your future potential, and your expectations. Now, this is not always nice to hear, but in the end, a lot of the times you're hired for what you are currently doing or what you currently bring to the table, not what you are going to do. So sometimes there is a little bit of a mismatch there because you want to move a step ahead or you want to change a little bit. It's always good to indicate what you want to learn and what you want to do next, but also be realistic that at first companies want to hire you for what they really need, what they urgently need. The impact of having a control and real insight in your own recruitment process is that you have a better understanding of why the initial offer is what it is, because you understand the team composition, you understand what they really need. So sometimes as if you bring more to the table than what is required, that can mean that the offer feels a little bit low, but it is in the end a fair offer. They're not trying to stick it to you. The offer is also less likely to be based on biased assumptions because both parties have very clearly articulated what they're expecting and the outcome is more realistic. Now I wanted to address for the last couple of minutes that I have a few general red flags. You can read them here. I think it is important to understand that work hard, play hard is great, except that it should never come to the expense of the work-life balance and that it doesn't glamorize overwork. Research has determined that overworking leads to burnout and not to more productivity. So work hard, play hard can mean that you need to reach end of month deadlines, and that's fine. But if it's structurally required, probably you should question it. That there's no structures and no processes, even if the word process can conjure up large bureaucracy, it is nice to have a framework because that will provide you with a bit of freedom. No defined KPIs or expectations. If there are really no KPIs, that's fine. If there are no KPIs, but also no expectations, that is a real big red flag. And because it should be clear what you contribute, what can be expected of you, because then only can you determine success and can you determine whether or not you fit. If a company hasn't figured that out, I would advise you to probe deeper. And if a company culture is summarized by a pool table or Friday afternoon drinks, I would also ask you to probe a bit deeper, particularly ask to talk to HR, because it is important to know that the basis of a good company culture is what is called psychological safety. Basically, it means that your values align with their values and that you feel enabled to speak up when you have new and novel ideas, or if you have a difference of opinion. And of course, having a pool table or having a foosball table and Friday afternoon drinks are a great bonus, especially if you feel comfortable enough to either participate or not. So these are just general red flags that I wanted to end it with, so that you can make good decisions on your next step.